RENNSPORT is a game with an already quite storied past, beginning development initially in 2020 with an early focus on esports, then entering closed beta in 2023, and finally entering a public early access period in the second half of 2024. But now, in my hands is the full 1.0 release of RENNSPORT, which comes out in just a few days on November 13th. RENNSPORT is a full racing sim in the same vein of Assetto Corsa, iRacing, LMU, and so on. This isn't really a light sim or simcade, or whatever term you think best fits games like Gran Turismo or Forza Motorsport. However, RENNSPORT is releasing not only on PC, but also on both Xbox and PlayStation, with optional full cross-platform play among all systems. We'll of course talk about that more later, but when discussing new sim racing titles, the question always is, why should you play this over any other sim on the market? And in this video, we're going to see if RENNSPORT has a good answer to that question. Let's talk about game content. RENNSPORT is releasing with 14 tracks, of which 9 are real racing circuits, and 19 cars across various classes like GT3 and 4, TCR, Hypercar, and so on. And this is not a lot, considering the variety of driving they want to include. Throughout the early access, I was hoping to see both the track and car list fill out a bit more, but that hasn't happened. The tracks they have look and feel like quality, up-to-date scans, and I do appreciate the variety of car classes they're including, but there just isn't much there. Many of the car classes feel incomplete, and with a lack of many weather effects or other dynamic track conditions, the limited amount of places you can race feels even more limiting. Now, RENNSPORT is doing something interesting here. They're attempting to allow a sort of approved mod program for tracks by giving players the tools to create and import custom-made circuits that will be playable on all systems. 2 of these tracks already exist, a city circuit called Orchard Road, and a long windy track in the Swiss Alps called Cresta Chorus. But right now, this isn't a process that's been fully ironed out, and it seems like it's not something they're super focused on for release. I love the idea of this. Fictional tracks can be very fun, and mod support, even if it does have to go through an approval process, still offers the possibility for a much faster growth of available content, hopefully for free, or at least with some proceeds going to the mod's author. And we should probably talk about the pricing model for RENNSPORT here too. Originally, RENNSPORT was using and planning to release with a free-to-play model, where you could download the game free of charge and experience a small slice of content, but then would purchase extra things like cars and liveries. They were kinda going for an iRacing model without the sub fee and without having to buy the game up front. However, they recently pivoted away from this, and now RENNSPORT has a $50 price tag on PC, $60 on console, to get the majority of content in the game. There's also a deluxe edition for an extra $20 that includes 1 extra car, the GT3R RENNSPORT, and 1 extra track, the Nordschleife. Yes, this track is locked behind the deluxe edition of the game. You also get the upcoming Endurance Classics and Touring Classics DLCs coming later if you buy the deluxe edition. So while I do appreciate that they're moving away from a more MTX-focused premium currency model where you have to buy everything separately, I fear that putting up a barrier to entry on the game is going to deter a lot of potential players that were on the fence, which I think is a pretty large group. Again, it's hard to get people to step away from the more established sims on the market. You have to offer something unique for players to do, or do existing things a lot better. So what can you actually do in RENNSPORT? Well, for single player, you can of course drive any car on any track with time trial leaderboards, and can set up custom race sessions against AI with a variety of options to customize the event, including up to 60x time scaling, which looks absolutely hilarious while you're out on the track. There isn't a true career in RENNSPORT though. Instead, they have a championship mode. This is a small set of championships in progressively higher tiers that you can work through to earn medals, and the goal of this seems more so to prepare you for multiplayer. It's structured like online races with practice and quali sessions, and the race durations are similar to most online races, but it does have a critical flaw. The AI drivers are way too slow. I ended up always skipping the practice and qualifying qualifying even if I'd never driven the track and car combo before, because even starting from the back with no practice, I'd usually pass everyone by the end of the first lap, heck, sometimes on the first corner. I thought this was maybe just going to be the case in rookies, like, okay, I've got some decent experience on a sim, I'm finishing these races 20 to 30 seconds ahead, but a rookie probably wouldn't. And then I moved up into the middle tier, did a GT4 race at Spa, and very casually finished an entire minute ahead of P2. I've heard that the AI gets progressively harder and that they are working on improvements to this, but I was just bored during these championships. They didn't offer any real racing because I was hot lapping at the front every event. I didn't feel any motivation to keep going. So if you're looking for good single player racing, RENNSPORT isn't delivering on that until their AI improves. But how about multiplayer? Well, I actually do quite like the online structure for RENNSPORT. It's not really breaking any new ground, but it does what it does well. There's a day-by-day race schedule, always viewable in the multiplayer tab, where you can see what events are coming up, how many people are registered, and so on, so it's easy to plan out your races, and there's always something for you to jump into on the official schedule, as well as some quick play matches on rotation at any given time. RENNSPORT does have its own rating system that you can progress through, and it will attempt to place you with other drivers of your skill level, and custom events can be easily set up by RENNSPORT for esports stuff or other special races. In my time during the early access, the multiplayer was quite smooth. I never really ran into any performance or server related hiccups, and I think this is probably because of how much they focused on getting the game esports ready early on. That does show itself in how solid the multiplayer is, but I haven't been able to try crossplay with the 1.0 release, so I can't comment on how well that works. Overall though, the multiplayer is decently well featured and offers the most value for players. Now I do want to talk a bit about handling. I've put a few dozen hours into RENNSPORT's early access before this review period, and have seen its handling and tire models go through a few iterations, and personally, I find that now overall the handling is quite nice, but not perfect from a sim perspective. My experience is coming primarily from other sims, comparing against ACC or iRacing for example, as a more casual player, but I have also been fortunate enough to chat with a few actual GT drivers about RENNSPORT, and I think we share a similar feeling. The two areas where I feel like RENNSPORT deviates from other more established sims are in the finer details from the tires and in the amount of rotation in each car. In RENNSPORT, there's not much road noise or detail. The grip level and surface is very smooth and uniform across basically every part of every track. And the tires themselves feel somewhat padded or soft. That confident connection to the road is what's lacking. So when you're trying to push cars to the limit on well-practiced tracks, that's where you need the extra detail and precision, and that's where I feel like RENNSPORT is missing out. The other major thing I've noticed that I've chatted with some other drivers about is how much the cars can rotate. There is a lot of grip over the front during low-speed cornering, and it alters how you drive some of the cars. You can brake very hard and get back on throttle very early, and trust that the car is going to pull you around the corner, when in many other sims you might benefit from coasting a bit longer and being more careful with your brakes. I also want to speak more to road conditions and those extra sim-focused details. RENNSPORT does have a damage system that's pretty decent and shows off in some areas how detailed these car models can be, even under the bodywork. Mechanically, it largely focuses around aero and suspension damage, but it feels fair, and the effects from driving a damaged car are well represented. However, RENNSPORT doesn't currently have very dynamic tracks or driving conditions. You can see time of day changes, but track rubbering, rain, fog, or any other weather conditions, persistent debris like gravel on the track, none of these exist right now. This means that races just don't have the variety I want to see from a sim. So everything I've talked about here, the lack of finer tire feedback, the cornering quirks, and the lack of variety in track conditions, means that RENNSPORT certainly takes a slimmed down and simpler approach. But remember that this is coming to Xbox and PlayStation, and I've got to say that RENNSPORT's handling on both lower end wheels and of course controllers is really quite good. This is a very playable experience on a controller, and I'd argue that you can be reasonably competitive. And this, I feel, is where a lot of the answer to that most important question comes from. RENNSPORT is really the only modern modern sim with full crossplay, and currently is one of the only modern racing sims at all on both Xbox and PlayStation. The playing field is fairly level, whether you're a beginner on an Xbox gamepad with a Series S, or a dedicated PC enthusiast with a multi-$1,000 cockpit. I tried the game on a Series X and didn't experience any noticeable frame drops below 60, which is of course extremely important for a competitive racing game. So it's nice to see that while they do miss out on ultra-wide support and a higher graphical fidelity, console players still get a competitively viable experience that can be enjoyed alongside PC. This is a first for the console sim market, but there are some shadows looming on the horizon, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So why RENNSPORT? Why play this instead of any other sim out there? Well, on PC, this is a tough sell. There are a lot of other really good, well-established options. RENNSPORT does have a very clean UI and good overall user experience. Everything is contained within the game. You have a high level of HUD customization, and input mapping, even for navigating menus, is really nice, so I basically never have to use my mouse or keyboard, and the race schedule and rating system is self-contained, not managed by a third party on a website or whatever. To play RENNSPORT, you just launch RENNSPORT. When I open iRacing, I also open Garage 61, Crew Chief, Trading Paints, Race Labs, and whatever else. When I want to race in Assetto Corsa, it's all done through Content Manager, a third-party app, and then I also go to the LFM website and have to look at the schedule there and download mods if they're needed for the races. But there is a trade-off there. Of course, those sims ultimately give me a more broad and fully featured racing experience. So while RENNSPORT on PC does offer an affordable and accessible one-stop shop for sim racing with a nice presentation and user experience, it doesn't offer a lot of actual content or do much of what it's doing better than any other sims on the market. And I think most PC sim racers are perfectly at home with a bit of jank and having to tweak and customize and use extra programs. We're all used to that, so it doesn't deter us from modding an AC or running half a dozen programs alongside iRacing. We just want to see some good racing and a healthy variety of content. Now on console, RENNSPORT does offer something that doesn't really exist. A modern, true sim racing experience with full crossplay that's also quite accessible. And if RENNSPORT is going to succeed anywhere, I think console is the place for it. But there are a couple elephants in the room. Project Motor Racing releases towards the end of this month, and while it does seem to be leaning a bit more towards simcade and might need a bit of time to smooth out kinks with multiplayer, it does have a much stronger focus on single player with a dedicated career mode and more tracks and more cars in more classes, which for all but the most hardcore sim racers is probably going to be more appealing. LMU also recently announced that a console version can be expected in about a year or so, and LMU also offers a pretty nice one-stop shop with a modern UX and pretty solid multiplayer. So if you're looking for a modern, more realistic, multi-class, multiplayer sim racer on console, RENNSPORT right now is your best option. And don't get me wrong, there is absolutely fun racing to be had here, but it's only a matter of time before PMR, LMU, and even AC Evo come to consoles as well, which is going to give players a lot more choice. Meanwhile on PC, while the handling is good, the visuals are pretty solid, and the PvP racing can be great, I just don't see what RENNSPORT is doing right now that can't be offered by other games on the market. I'd love to see them lean into that mod support system, and hopefully they can fix the AI and expand on the championships to offer more when it comes to single player, but before that happens, I don't see RENNSPORT offering a good answer to why you should buy it over anything else. Like with many other games, there is a lot of promise for the future, and sure, in a year or two, RENNSPORT could be on par with its competition, with potentially a lot of cool modded tracks you can't get anywhere else, but I think a lot of us are tired of paying for a promise. Thanks for watching, folks. As always, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on RENNSPORT, so let me know how you're feeling with it, and I'll see you in the next video.